Hi, Tati here, and welcome to Calmly Coping. I am here with Kezia Luckett, who is a positive psychologist, 3 times international bestselling author of the Pay It Forward series, Notes to My Younger Self, and creator behind 2 revolutionary modalities, the Energy Code and Mind Conditioning Therapy. Combining positive psychology, quantum physics, heart math, and energy work, her transformational results-oriented approach has seen her work with a variety of clients, including celebrities, lawyers, CEOs, influencers, entrepreneurs, and more to help them shift their limiting beliefs, fears, and barriers that restrict people and unlocking their natural energy code to reach optimum levels of success, wealth, and happiness that they desire. So thank you so much for joining me. So can you tell us more about yourself and what got you into the work that you're currently doing?
Yes, of course. So I'm a positive psychologist, which focuses on what's right with people. So we focus on what makes people flourish and thrive, but also not only people, but communities and organizations as well. And I came into this line of work following walking away from my first business where I burnt out. I ran a female-based concierge company, helping corporate women juggle the work-life balance, and ended up being a casualty really of my success, in so much as the company grew dramatically from 3 members of staff to 35, grew geographically, but I was just finding myself working every hour that God sends, literally working every hour that God sends. I'd set up the business really to create a better work-life balance for myself. I actually
Mhm.
found that I was working far more than I ever did in a 9 to 5 job. And when I burnt out, it really kind of set me on a mission of, well, what is it that I really want to do? And positive psychology literally came up on a Facebook post, and I was like, that sounds interesting. And that sent me on a 3-year master's focusing on positive psychology.
Very interesting. Yeah. So I think it's interesting that you started that business to have more work-life balance, but then it turned into the opposite. When did you realize that you were feeling burnt out and getting to that point and decided to make that shift?
Well, it's interesting because I had a coach at the time, and I remember going up and sitting around a boardroom table. There was a group of us, we were in a mastermind, and the coach came behind me and she kind of put her hands on my shoulders. And I remember looking up at her, and she just said one sentence, which was, "I don't think your business is making you happy." And before I even had a chance to think about it, these words were spilling out of my mouth of, "Don't be so ridiculous. I've spent 5 years building this business. It's my baby." But every fiber of my body was thinking, actually, I think she might be right. And I remember going
Mhm.
home on the journey home, and I walked in back home with the family, and they were sitting around having dinner. And my husband says, "So how did your day go?" And I repeated that very sentence. And all of a sudden, my little boy, who would have been about 5 at the time, just piped up and he goes, "Mummy, she's right. You're always so grumpy." And
Mhm.
it was just like, oh my gosh, if he can see it, then there must be a real problem. And children are very intuitive anyway, but it was at
Yeah.
that point, I remember getting into bed that night and I just looked at my husband and I said, I have to shut the business down. I
Mm.
couldn't even physically think about selling it or doing anything with it. My main concern was placing my employees with the people that they worked for, and for me to get the hell out of it so that I could just rest.
Mhm. Yeah, so that must have been a tough decision to make. And it sounds like you didn't even realize what was going on until your coach brought it to your attention.
No. I mean, I knew that something wasn't right because I'd set up the business, in order to give myself balance. That was what I was doing for other people. My
Mhm.
team of ladies would go in and do everything from food shopping to food prep to, tidying the house, housekeeping, looking after the children, so that when the mums came in, the corporate busy mums came in at the end of the day, they could spend quality time with their kids without having to do all that stuff. But here was me juggling all of those balls and 10 times more, even though I had managers that were looking after zones. I just hadn't given myself permission to have that for myself.
And so what changed? You said that you found positive psychology and started studying that.
Yes. So I'd always been interested in the brain and what makes people tick, and even from a very young age, I was the little girl that sat on the bus that little old ladies used to come and sit next to and offload all of their problems just because they felt better after doing so. So I was always interested in what makes people tick, and like I say, this positive psychology popped up, and I was just like, that makes perfect sense, because why are we focusing on what's wrong with us? The normal psychologist or psychiatrist you go to, and you regurgitate time and time again the same stories around what's wrong with you. And all that does is really just embed those stories in deeper, and those beliefs and those fears and those expectations. The idea that you could look at what was right with people and you could build that up to a point that actually those so-called weaknesses or negativity could start to dissipate just made so much sense to me. And I saw the advertisement. It wasn't even an advertisement. I think somebody had posted about positive psychology. And I went on the computer and realized that there were only 7 centers in the world that did a master's in positive psychology at that time.
Wow.
And as synchronicity would have it, one of those centers just happened to be 20 minutes from my house. And what was even better was we were just getting ready to move to Barcelona in Spain, and they also did it long distance. And I was just like, this is meant to be. And I phoned them up and said, look, I'm interested. I had my interview on the Wednesday. I started on the Saturday. And as soon as I walked in and they started the lectures, it was just like, I'm home. This is the science behind spiritual stuff that I have known intuitively to be true. But my background's always been science, so I like the data.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no. And I think that's important what you point out. Like, historically, there's been the medical model of focusing on what's wrong and the disease and the disorders and the diagnoses. And I think there can be a big stigma associated with that. And so you're bringing up that concept of positive psychology, like focusing on people's strengths and building that up. I think there's definitely a lot to be gained from that.
We all have conditioning that we carry around with us, some of which is passed through the heritage. Epigenetics now shows that up to 14 generations worth of fears, beliefs, and experiences can be passed down, not just DNA. So we're carrying around not only this kind of heritage pattern, but also our own conditioning of the experiences that we've had and the stories that we've created. And I think that there is a real validity in exploring those and changing the story that sits behind them. So rather than them being quite limiting stories, we can change them to be positive. I think when we do that from the kind of so-called negativity aspects of ourselves and our identity, that can change absolutely everything. I think that there is a real danger at the moment, and I'm seeing it coming through lots and lots, especially with what we've all been through over the last year of this toxic positivity of just think happy thoughts and everything's going to be okay. And actually, yes, of course, we want to be in that state of positivity, but the so-called negative emotions are there for a reason, and they're so important, and we shouldn't negate when they come through.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And so what do you recommend for people to bring awareness to those negative emotions and not get sucked in that positive or toxic positivity trap?
I like to think of the so-called negative emotions as an alarm system on your house. So if you have an alarm system on your house and it starts going off, the alarm starts going off, it's warning you that something has changed. i.e. an intruder or something has happened to change the dynamics and the safety and security of your home. And the same with the negative emotions. When they come through, they're warning you. They're a guidance system of, do you know what? Something isn't quite right here. And the way that most people use those so-called negative emotions is they will try and discard it in the toxic positivity. Well, let's just discard it and come up with something more positive to think about. Well, actually, that can worsen our anxiety, worsen the pressure on ourselves. The other alternative is we'll just stuff it down. We'll just pretend it's not there. We'll just squeeze it and push it down because we're not meant to feel that because that's a negative emotion. Well, again, that's got to come out somewhere, at some point in time. And it's like having a pressure cooker of all these negative emotions that at some point are going to explode somewhere. So rather than do those kind of discard or push down, I like to get my clients to explore them. So if it's a warning sign, what is it warning you of? Is it that you're out of alignment? Is it that actually you're feeling unsafe? Is it that something's going on in your environment, in your thoughts, in your behaviors, in the behaviors of others that is saying, do you know what? Actually, this needs to be explored. And when we can bring it out and explore it from the point of view of negative emotion or positive emotion is neither negative or positive. It's just our interpretation of what it is. So if we can look at it as to, okay, what is it trying to tell us at this moment in time? And we can ask good questions that can explore why we're feeling that way at that moment in time. Then we can start to process it. Then we can start to change the narrative around it. And then we can start to utilize its power. You wouldn't want to feel love if you came round the corner and there was a saber-toothed tiger in front of you. You want to feel fear. You want to feel fear because it's going to trigger your emotions, your neurotransmitters, the hormones that are flooding through your body, the activation of your muscles to get you out of there. You do not want to feel love when you're in a danger scenario. And certain emotions can be used as empowerment tools. So when people are angry, depending on how they control that anger, it can be a really good action emotion. When we're angry, we normally think, right, okay, I'm going to move away from this, or I'm going to move towards that. And therefore, we're more likely to action something. Obviously, we don't want to action it in the heat of the moment of anger, because quite often we say things that we don't really mean in those moments. But we should never negate those emotions. They're there for a reason. And I just like to think that it's an internal GPS system that's guiding us to where we need to go.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that description you gave of like that internal alarm system. And you just said that GPS, that I think we can have that avoidance of like what we determine to be like negative emotions because we don't want to feel that way. But like you said, that can really just result in things worsening and, discarding them, avoiding them, or pushing them down, which is going to come out in some way anyway. So I like how you put that of like seeing them as a guide or a signal as to like what is my body trying to tell me in this moment.
Yeah. And our brain has a negativity bias. So our brain is constantly looking for danger. Constantly looking for danger. And what tends to happen with our brain and the way that it operates is when we feel a perceived danger, i.e. we have that negative emotion, our brain is going to search the database of the last time that we felt that. And quite often it won't put all the pieces of the puzzle together correctly. It needs to act, and it needs to act quickly in order to keep us safe. So information comes in, we feel an emotion, the brain goes, uh-oh, been here before. This is what we did last time. And that's when we get triggered and the behaviors and emotions go on repeat. And 95% of our subconscious programming is programmed into us by the time we're 35. So we have 5% of our conscious brain to rein our brain in, to rein in those triggers, those actions and behaviors, and go, do you know what? There might be another way. there might be another way. Let's just explore what this feeling is actually all about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I think that's really fascinating what you say about like 95% of the subconscious is programmed by the time we're 35. Can you speak more about that?
The way that, yes, I mean, I could speak about it for hours, hours and hours. As we go through life, we are conditioned in a certain way. You know, we're conditioned in the way that we treat ourselves. We're conditioned in the expectations of others. We're conditioned in the way that we judge ourselves, the internal dialogue in our head, a wide variety of different things. And the conditioning happens over and over and over again. And the more it happens and the more it's programmed in, it becomes an automatic reflex, which is why I say 95% of your behaviors, your actions, your thoughts and deeds are programmed. They're on automatic. And so the simplest way to start kicking that out and saying, do you know what, actually, that's not served me particularly well, is awareness. And awareness is like flexing a muscle. It takes a while for us to go, oh, I'm experiencing this emotion. It normally goes hand in hand with this behavior and these actions. But actually, I'm now aware that this emotion's come in. I've stopped it. So you've grabbed that emotion. You haven't stopped the feeling, but you've grabbed it and you're aware of it. And when you've got the awareness, then you can make more informed choices. And that's where that 5% comes in. And if you continue to do that over a period of time, like flexing that muscle, then you can, over a period of time, start to change that conditioning and those patterns and behaviors that have been programmed into you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I agree that awareness is key. That awareness takes you from that like autopilot of, like you're saying, being just controlled by that 95% of the subconscious into flexing that muscle, like you were saying, into that control.
Yes. Yeah. And we often think, especially when we're not feeling great, that we have no control. And one of the things that we always have a control on is the way that we think and the way that we interpret what's going on around us. That means having that awareness. It means stepping into that space of, I'm having this, I'm feeling this, why am I?
Yeah.
And asking some really good questions around, what is the universe trying to show me? Why is this coming up again? What lesson haven't I learned? How can I navigate this better? This happened last week. So, what triggered that? And then you can start to build a better picture. The thing is, like you've just said, we tend to go on autopilot. And so much of our lives these days is on autopilot. We're on Groundhog Day, just the thoughts that we have. I think 95% of our thoughts are repeats from the day before, and 80% of those are negative. So, we're constantly on this repeating cycle. And so many of us are reactive rather than proactive. But if you want to live your life in a different way, we have to be proactive as to how we implement those changes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really interesting. And can you speak to like specifically when it comes to like that burnout, overwhelm, and exhaustion, how you can start to become more aware of, like you were saying, like those emotions and the subconscious and those beliefs in order to get out of that place?
Yes. So one of the things that I did from my burnout and running my female-based concierge company was look at the natural peaks and troughs of women. And actually, as women, we've historically learned how to look after ourselves, to honor ourselves, to care for ourselves through the generations that have gone before us. So unless you've actively chosen to do something different, the chances are that if your mother was a giver and liked to contribute and always put herself at the bottom of the list, the chances are you will be the same. And we've kind of grown up in a society which has been very much in the masculine of doing. We've been taught that there are certain things that are to be revered, like multitasking. Oh my goodness, you're such a good multitasker. Oh, you've worked an 80 to 90-hour work week. Oh my gosh, you're amazing. So those kind of things, we've been programmed in that you've got to work hard, that you've got to push through, that if you want to make money, you've got to work hard for it. So there's a lot of influence around what we have to do in order to get where we're going. And we've got it all around the wrong way. It's about who we need to be in order to get where we're going. And there has to be a balance. Yes, we're in a masculine world. We're starting to pull back more into the feminine now, but there is masculine and feminine within each of us. So the masculine is the doing energy. The feminine is the being energy. When you're in burnout, when you're in overwhelm, when it's all become too much, you have normally been historically in the masculine for too long. And you've been in the masculine for so long that you have ignored the warning signs of your body. So the easiest way to describe this is if you imagine a stainless steel bucket and you wake up in that morning and you've had a good night's sleep, so your energy bucket is topped up. And as you go throughout the day, your energy bucket is either depleting or it's being filled up, depending on what you're doing and how much you love it and all of those good things. So if you imagine that your energy bucket's depleting, when you've reached overwhelm, anxiety, depression, burnout, your bucket is empty. You have ignored the warning signs that your body has been screaming at you. And then what happens in this particular energy space, which I like to call it the nurture energy space, it's so far removed from nurture, it's just untrue. It's the survival zone. It's where you're clinging onto the wall and your nose is just above water. Your legs are going 19 to the dozen underneath the water, but all everybody can see is somebody that's got it all together, knows what they're doing, and is absolutely brilliant. But you have this sinking feeling that at some point in time, one of those plates is going to crash on the floor and the whole lot's going to come tumbling down. And in the nurture energy space, what tends to happen, unfortunately, is when we've been ignoring our body for so long, the universe has kind of whacked us round the face with a piece of wood several times and we still haven't listened. Then what it will do is it will force you to stop. And that forcing to stop for me was burnout. It was depression. It was my husband coming home one day to find me lying on the floor, unable to breathe because I had pneumonia.
Oh, wow.
So you're forced to stop in the nurture energy space. And the key word there, the only thing that you can do in the nurture energy space is to stop. And it's the hardest thing for women to do is to stop, because it feels like it's a weakness. It feels like, well, if I ask for help or if I stop or if I take time out for me, I must be lazy. And then it brings up the emotions of guilt and shame and procrastination and all of these things. It's not because you're lazy. It's not because you're weak. It's because you've been strong for so long that your body has said enough already. It's time for you to take time out for yourself. And in that moment, you're forced to stop. And there is a feeling for many women that get into that space of, well, I have to stop now because I'm in hospital. I have permission now to stop, rather than giving themselves that permission. So the energy space of nurture is really that space where you've been in the masculine, you've been strong for so long, and you're now forced to stop because you haven't listened to what your body's telling you.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating what you describe with those masculine and feminine energies. And I think there really is that expectation to be in that masculine of always doing. And there's a lot of fear around it, like you mentioned being lazy, or there can also be that internal fear of like, well, that means I'm not good enough. Because I think that's a lot of time how we're measured by how much we're doing. And that's what other people see. How do you get that balance between the masculine and the feminine before you get to that point of where your body's telling you, all right, that's enough? What does that feminine or being energy consist of or look like?
It's an interesting question, because if you look at a baby, or I mean, we got a puppy recently, they know how to tap into that. And you know that they know how to tap in it because they sleep when they need to sleep. They eat when they need to eat. They drink when they need to drink. They go for the toilet when they need to go to the toilet. And they play when they need to play. They know, intuitively know. We intuitively, as human beings, know, or we knew when we were first born, what it is that we need. All you've got to do is look at a child that needs food. They're like screaming at the top of their lungs. They need to eat. And as human beings, we've kind of been programmed that there is an honor in being able to go the whole day without taking a break. I've worked all day.
Yeah.
I've not eaten all day. I've not even managed to have a time to go to the toilet. There's this honor of that. So it's really getting back to basics. And the energy code is not rocket science. Its magic is in its simplicity. And anybody that thinks that taking time out for themselves and doing nothing is not working, try doing it. It's one of the hardest things in the world.
Yeah, it is. That's why so many people struggle with meditation.
It's one of the hardest things in the world. And the way that you rest will look different for different people. So when you've mastered the nurture energy space and you've moved away from the heritage patterns, you will historically then only need to work with 3 of the energy spaces. So whisper, create, and shine. Now, whisper is again another being space. And the easiest way to describe whisper is that bucket is either full or it's empty. In whisper, it's filling up. And if you think about the way that we eat because we expend energy and we burn off the food. And the same with our energy. If you're sitting there concentrating on a project for 2 hours, you're burning energy. So at some point in time, you need to top that up. So the way that you would top it up will be different for different people, depending on whether they're more in the masculine or more in the feminine. So for me, my top up in the whisper energy space, and my top up normally comes just after lunchtime, where I just go, I'm feeling a bit tired now. 10-minute nap. I'm job done, and I can carry on going for the rest of the day. 10-minute nap, or a 10-minute walk around the block, or going into the living room and reading. My husband will quite often come in and go, "What are you doing?" I'm just like, "I'm just whispering." And he goes, "Okay, I'll leave you to it." He knows now. Even my children, they will quite often come to me and say, "I need a day off. I need a whisper day. I need a day to replenish my bucket."
Mm-hmm.
And so if we can do that for ourselves, we can demonstrate it for our children. If we can honor what our children say, because the natural tendency is to say, "But you have school. You can't take a day off. You've got to go."
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's that expectation to just push through, to keep going and just ignore it.
But as women, we have a natural cycle. If we have our feminine cycle, we have days where our hormones drop dramatically, our hormones peak. We're going through pain because we might be menstruating. We're going through headaches and tenderness and backaches. And I mean, my daughter's young. She's 15. She faints every month around her period.
Oh, wow.
Literally out for the count. It's like she's in labor. I mean, it's really hard. If I taught her to push through during that, she's not honoring her body. But we have historically been taught that every day is exactly the same as the day before. So you just pull yourself together in the English way, put your stiff upper lip on, and just, go out into the world. But when we do that, we move out of alignment with who we truly are and how our body wants to act.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, I think that's interesting. And I think it is important to listen to your body and what phase you currently are in. And, you had mentioned doing things like taking a nap or going for a walk or reading a book as a way of like getting into that whisper, or like that recharging energy.
For some people, more masculine dominated, for them, that's too low key. That would drive them insane. So it might be that they need to go to a cafe where there's hustle and bustle around them, so they still feel that energetic movement, and they might sit there and people watch. For my son, obviously he's a boy and he's very much in his masculine. His is going out on his mountain bike for 2 or 3 hours and just being in nature, being on the bike, feeling into the experience of the wind and the nature, and being in a state of flow. For other people, it might be doing artwork and stepping into a state of flow, riding a horse and stepping into a state of flow, anything that's going to support you in topping up that energy bucket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, and I think that's great how you describe that. It's going to be different for different people. And you mentioned that state of flow, and just in case there's anybody who may not understand what that means, can you describe what you mean by that?
So from a psychology perspective, it tends to be a level of difficulty that keeps you occupied, along with a level of enjoyment. So when we step into a space of doing something that we absolutely love, it's like when you start a project, and it could be painting, it could be gardening, it could be anything. And all of a sudden you look at your watch and you go, oh my gosh, like 4 hours have passed. Where has that time gone? You're in a state of flow. You're just engrossed in that present moment. And most of us are either constantly living in the future or constantly living in the past. And, that's where anxiety comes, because we're trying to live in the future, and depression comes when we're living in the past. So being in a state of flow puts you in the present here and now. And that's where the magic happens, in the present here and now. It doesn't happen in the future or in the past, because the future never comes. The only thing that we have is here and now. So the more you can be in the present here and now, the more you can listen to your body, watch the emotions that are coming in and understand them and explore them and be aware of them, the more we can start to navigate an intentional and conscious life rather than a life on autopilot.
Yeah, no, I think that was very well said. And let's say, like, for somebody who has a demanding job, or who is, works full time and is a parent, like, how do you suggest, like, practically that they would start to integrate like these ways of like fulfilling that recharging or that whisper energy?
So the first thing is to understand your pattern, your natural pattern. So for kind of like early morning people, sleeping, if they've had a good night's sleep, will have topped their energy bucket up. So they'll probably find themselves far more productive first thing in the morning. So then they can start to weight their day. So, right, the things that are urgent that we need to get done, that, take a lot of the thought power, because when we're in whisper, we move out of our head and back into our body. And this gives us an opportunity for ideas and things to come in the create energy space. So if you're a morning person, first thing in the morning, focus on those things, those juicy projects that need to get done, knowing damn well that unless you're taking time out for yourself during the day, probably just after lunch or mid-afternoon, you're going to get a natural dip where you'll need to top up your energy bucket. If you're in the workplace, yes, it might seem that it's difficult to do, but moving your body is one way that you can top up your energy space. And if you're not a smoker, and many people aren't, the smokers will go out probably at least once an hour for a quick cigarette. Take yourself out. Just go down, walk outside the door, walk around a little bit and come back up again. It's enough of a movement change to be able to get the brain fog out and get back into your body ready to start again. It could be you go and make a cup of coffee and you take time out to stretch your body during that time. You pop yourself to the bathroom and stick on some headphones and just listen to a 5-minute meditation. I often do 5-minute meditations for my clients so they can change state really quickly in just 5 minutes. You don't need a huge amount of time. It could be that you go, do you know what? Actually, I'm just going to go on the park bench and I'm going to read for 5-10 minutes. Change the environment that you're in, your energy will change. Movement helps change your energy state as well. We want to get you out of your head and back into your body in the whisper energy space. And anybody that's sitting in front of a computer in the workplace and they're finding that they're struggling to figure things out, it's because they're trying to use their brain too much. And the best thing for you to get the inspiration to know what the next step is to move that body.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's fascinating how you describe like getting into your body is going to then allow you to have more of that creativity and like just brain energy or brain power.
And for the evening people, you might find that first thing in the morning, you're a bit slower. So you're going to stack your day towards the end of the day because that's when you're starting to become more productive. So you might start off slower first thing in the morning, and then your momentum builds in the afternoon. So it's about honoring your natural rhythm. And once you start tracking your energy spaces, you can start to see not only the difference in each day alongside your feminine cycle or the lunar cycle, if you don't have your menstruation, if you don't have your period, but you can start to see the peaks and troughs. And when I work with high performing individuals, how much better is it in business to know that you can push now because you have enough energy to push, and that you can pull back because right now you haven't got enough energy to expand in business, in life, in relationships, etc. And then you end up with this beautiful understanding of, do you know what? This time last month, I was feeling like I was in a whisper energy space. So I know I need to clear my diary down and not do anything too energetic. But I know next week I move into this heightened create or shine energy space. This is the time to be doing those things that involve creativity, that involve collaboration, that involve shining your light out to the world. If you knew that, then you can manage your diary in a much better way. And that's when we tap into the natural rhythms.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's so fascinating. And that just brings to mind for me, like, I can think last week I was like so low energy and unmotivated. And then this week it's like all of these ideas are coming to me and I'm like pushing. And so I think that's just fascinating to see and to recognize that in yourself.
Yeah. And the other thing that tends to happen is when we're in that lower energy, so when we're maybe in the whisper or the nurture, what tends to happen is the internal dialogue, that little voice in our head, starts to get brutal. It can start to get really mean. And that's when it goes, well, you're just lazy. Everybody else can do this. Why are you not doing this? Why are you feeling so rubbish? All of these horrible things. Well, when you master your energy code, you keep your positivity wall in front of you. So when things come in, whether it's a comment that you see on Facebook or a conversation that you have with a loved one that for whatever reasons just triggered you, when that comes in, you've got positivity here as a bolster to bounce it off. When you're in the lower energy, especially the nurture energy space, you can be brutal with yourself. The language and the words that you use in your head, in your natural internal dialogue, are really mean. And if you were to say them out loud, people would be shocked that you were even saying that to yourself. So when we rest, when we replenish, we protect ourselves to a certain degree from that internal dialogue, because we courageously, and it is courageously, anybody that's listening to this, it's courageous to honor what it is that your body needs and give yourself permission to take time out for you.
Yeah, no, I think that's powerful because I think you had said this earlier, like a lot of women and I think people in general will see that as a weakness, that they're taking a step back or they're taking a break or recharging. But I agree that it is courageous to listen to your body and to just take what you need in order to take care of yourself.
Yeah, and so many of us don't. And then we wonder why we're not living the true essence of what it means to be human and to enjoy all of the experiences around us. We haven't got time. We're on autopilot. And
Mm-hmm.
then, you know, I remember having a conversation with my husband, and he goes, when I reach retirement age, then I can do all of those things. And I was just like, but you might not reach retirement age. Let's enjoy it now.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Let's step off the treadmill now. Now, my husband works a quote unquote normal job, but it's understanding that you can live the true essence of who we were put on this planet to live and experience things in a way that feels amazing to us without having to give up so much of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really fascinating. And, I think that concept that you're sharing is of, that combination of the positive psychology with then those different energy states and listening to yourself is important. And it's something that a lot of people, we weren't taught, or, we, like you said, through epigenetics and through previous generations, we definitely weren't taught it, especially as women who tend to be givers and sacrifice themselves to care for their families and for others. And I think that's something that's really important for people to relearn.
Not only for ourselves, but for the generations that come after us, because my children understand that I might just go, do you know what, I'm just going to go into the living room and I'm going to sit and read. I'm going to be gone for an hour. Obviously my kids are older, but even when they were younger, I used to tuck them behind my legs and I used to take a nap, if they didn't want to nap. So I knew that they were safe. By demonstrating that, I'm demonstrating to them through my words, my actions, and my deeds that I deserve the very best. Like, I want them to have the very best themselves. I want them to honor what their body's telling them. I do not want them to have to go through burnout and overwhelm and exhaustion and anxiety and depression and all of those things. I want the very best for them. And it doesn't work if we just simply tell them. We have to show them and demonstrate it. And what better way to do it than verbally say, do you know what, I'm taking time out. I'm having a whisper time, or as my children call it, a nurture time. Just taking nurture out, and I'm just having some time to myself.
Yeah, no, I agree that modeling is very important. And so it seems like there's only things to be gained from taking that time and from having that balance between the masculine and the feminine, or whatever that looks like for each individual.
Yeah. Yes. And like I say, it will change the dynamics of your life. And it does mean flexing that muscle, taking time out to be aware and practice with it.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah. So I think that brings us to the end of our episode or our interview for today. Was there anything else that you wanted to add, or about just what you were discussing with the energy code, or any other additional details about like where people can find you?
I think the easiest thing is if you go to energycodeforwomen.com, you can take a test and it will automatically tell you what energy space you're in. So it's a simple test. It won't take you any longer than maybe half a minute. It's 8 simple questions and it will automatically tell you what energy space you're in. You don't have to put your email in there or anything like that. If you want additional information, you can download a tracker, you can download a meditation and various other things by signing up for our Energy Code Starter Kit. But right now, what I would suggest your listeners do is go and do that quiz every day. If you can do it twice a day, even better. And start to track in your diary what energy space you're in. Then start to track that alongside your feminine cycle so that you can start to see the peaks and troughs in your natural month to month. From there, you can start to honor yourself and look after yourself in a way that feels, in alignment with who you are.
Great. Fascinating. So I'll put that link in the show notes as well. So you said it's energycodeforwomen.com.
It is. It is.
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining me. It was a really enlightening conversation, and it was great to have you on Calmly Coping.
Thank you very much.